Now let's bring in Liberal Senator for New South Wales and former Australian Ambassador to Israel, Dave Sharma. Dave, thanks for joining us, and we'll come to the Middle East in just a second. But first up, I just want to ask you about Anthony Albanese and whether you believe that he can actually survive this blatant broken promise on the tax cuts.
Good afternoon, Chris. Well, look, this is a leader who staked almost his entire platform on doing politics differently, a return of integrity to public office, keeping commitments. He was, in his own words, his word is his bond, and he was a man of his word. Now, this is the most flagrant, the most hypocritical, the most outrageous breach of a promise which is legislated, going back at least to Paul Keating's reversal of his LAW tax cuts. Now, I don't see how anyone can trust anything he says now, whether it's to do with negative gearing, whether it's to do with tax on the family home, whether it's to do with any number of issues. If he can tell you one thing 100 times or more, take it to an election on 2 occasions, and then tear it up at the drop of a hat because political circumstances are such that he, says it's an act of necessity. I mean, this is no way to treat the public. It's no way to treat the voters. It's no way to treat our political system. He's treating us all as mugs.
Yeah, it's a shocking way to treat people, and there have been so many precedents for how this will backfire. Tell me then, what should the coalition do? Should you oppose these changes in Parliament, which might force Labor then to try and do some deal that makes them even worse by dealing with the Greens, or should you just wave them through and let Labor deal with the consequences?
Well, I think, obviously the party room needs to discuss and decide this. But my view is we took a tax package to the last election. We legislated that tax package. That was the stage 3 tax cuts as unamended. And I think we should fight very much against Labor's changes to that, which destroy incentive, which undermine the integrity of the tax system, which do very little to address cost of living, and which will reap the rewards of further bracket creep in the years ahead, as Treasury's own analysis shows. I mean, I think this is bad tax policy. It's not reform, and it's not doing anything meaningful to address cost of living pressures.
All right, let's go to the Middle East and talk about UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Association. It's the aid organisation for the UN in the Palestinian territories. You would have dealt with it when you were Australia's ambassador in Israel. Australia has funded that organisation to varying levels under coalition and Labor governments. But now that we know people on the payroll of UNRWA were actually involved in the Hamas terrorist atrocity on October the 7th, rather than just suspending funding, should we commit to never funding that organisation again?
I don't think we should ever fund that organisation again. I mean, when I returned as Australia's ambassador to Israel in 2017, one of my valedictory messages was UNRWA is part of the problem here, not part of the solution. And that has manifestly been demonstrated to be the case here. It's shocking, but it shouldn't surprise anyone that UNRWA, which employs tens of thousands of people in Gaza, ends up working inevitably hand in glove with the occupying authority of Gaza, which is Hamas. It's clear now that some of their employees were actively involved in the terrorist attacks, but it's also equally clear that hundreds or thousands of their employees, even if they weren't personally involved, cheered them on, facilitated it, allowed their schools, their buildings, their hospitals to be used by Hamas for these purposes. I mean, fundamentally, if we want a new reality in the Middle East, and I certainly do, one that allows Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace side by side, then UNRWA can have no future, because all UNRWA does is fuel and accelerate this intergenerational conflict.
Yeah, and there's no doubt the successive Australian governments, certainly on the coalition side, have had grave concerns about UNRWA, and as you say, all of that has been writ large. Now, just on this issue and the way it's being handled in domestic politics, I want to show you a clip of a little protest in Adelaide on the weekend. Listen to this.
Intifada, intifada. Intifada, intifada. Intifada, intifada. Intifada, intifada. Intifada, intifada.
Look, this is sickening stuff, isn't it, Dave? These useful idiots in Adelaide thinking they're protesting for Palestinian downtrodden people. By calling for an intifada, aren't they calling for more violence against Israel, more terrorism?
I think they're cheering on Hamas, and they're calling for more attacks like we saw on October the 7th, more slaughter of civilians, more rape and sexual assault of women, and more, abuse of the elderly, all these sorts of horrible things we saw on the 7th of October. You can support a Palestinian national cause and a state for the Palestinian people, but you should not be supporting a listed terrorist organisation which engages in the sort of barbarism we've seen for Hamas. So, by all means, indicate your support for a Palestinian state, but indicate it in a way that comes about through political means, through peaceful means. It's a Palestinian state that's reconciled to Israel's existence, not a movement like Hamas that's committed to Israel's destruction.
Great to talk to you, Dave. Great to have you back in the Parliament, and all the best for 2024.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Dave Sharma there, former Australian ambassador to Israel. And it is great for the country, whether you support the Liberal Party or not, to have someone of his experience and intellect in the Senate dealing with some of these issues and helping out in the debate.